Good evening. I'm Godfrey Cheshire. I'm a film critic with RogerEbert.com. Very happy to be here tonight and to introduce to you these two gentlemen, the writer-director of MUSEO, Alonso Ruizpalacios, and the star of the film, Gael Garcia Bernal. And I said earlier, I'm so happy to be a part of this because I'm a New York film critic who loves Mexico, loves Mexican people, Mexican culture, and Mexican cinema, and loves the work of these two guys. I really was crazy about his film Güeros, his first film, which came out a few years ago, and he reminded me that I wrote the liner notes that are in the DVD, so you should go search those out. And Gael, I've been a fan of his since Amores Perros, and we've seen him in so many great films, Motorcycle Diaries, Y Tu Mama Tambien, No, Rosewater, a million others, and so it's great to have the chance to talk to these two guys about this film, which I really, really liked. Hope you did too. I am interested in the sort of the truth behind the story that we see here, which is, I understand, very fictionalized, but I wanted to ask Alonso, you started out with a script that some other people have, and then you were brought aboard as director and you rewrote it with a writing partner. Tell me what it was that you saw at first and what you did with it.
Yeah, so I got involved in this film about 4 years ago, and it already, Manuel had been developing it for about another 6 years prior to that, and they'd even done a documentary which is it was out on Netflix last year or so, called Bellas de Noche, Beauties of the Night, I think is what they called it.
Wait a second, that was a film, a documentary about strippers.
Yeah, well, they weren't quite strippers. They were these kind of vedettes. That's the proper name, vedettes. They're actresses, and they do sexy comedies.
Okay.
Some of them do.
But none of them robbed a museum, did they?
No, but one of them was involved with the thieves. She talks about it briefly in the documentary, and that's she's the one that the Sherezada character is inspired on.
Okay.
So Manuel was doing all this research that eventually led to that documentary as well. And he saw Güeros and he said, "I want you to direct this." And I read it. I mean, the thing that I wasn't planning on doing something that I hadn't written myself, but this story was like I kept thinking about it, and it just was incredible. It was like a complete fiction. So I couldn't let it pass. But I said to Manuel, let's rewrite it because it doesn't quite work as a film. For me, it was just like a presentation of facts. And so the journey was a journey of discovery, of like stripping it away from. It was more to do with taking stuff away, taking out the facts. But the essence that was in the that's in the original story, and that I hope is somehow in the film, is all these themes that and all these questions it raises about the relationship between history and stories, and fiction, and how there's a lot of fiction in history, and also like, why the hell did these guys do it? That was never solved in all of the research that we did. We could never answer that question, and until one day we decided, earlier you were asking me about we were talking about motivations. For me, that's one of the things that I defend about the movie, that we will not explain the motivations of these characters because we cannot really know them. We never did, and that was so frustrating about this case.
Gael, do you, if you play a character where the motivation in the script is not spelled out, do you have to have a motivation in your mind, and did you have one for this character? What did you think propelled Juan to do what he did?
Well, the thing is that really the downsizing any decision made by a complex human being is like, it's impossible to do it in real life. You know, there's many reasons that come together why somebody does what they do, and ultimately this case is one that puzzled many people because of that, because of the nature of it, and also because they recovered all the pieces, you know, and also because they were kids from Satellite, you know, they were Mexicans stealing the Museum of Anthropology. Nobody kind of understood why they did it, you know, like, and they never gave a like a very clear answer also, like or a very public answer of one of them when he was caught, at least. So it is also it is open questions, no, and basically that's what one does as an actor also. Like, you go up there on stage and you kind of work and find reasons, you know, and they might change all the time because I mean, fortunately, it is that type of question, and I mean, it is not who this character is or why it is, you know. I mean, it's rather who this character wants to be, which is an easier question to answer and take on board. And it's at least good to as a departure point, and then it's changing. It's a constant mutation because life is complex, because we are complicated, because, you know, I mean, right now we're hungry, but right now some of you already had plans to eat, but you're staying here a little bit, you know, and you want to hear some amazing answer, and it's very difficult for me. no, you know, it changes and it evolves.
Well, these two main characters were based on real guys who were studying veterinary medicine or something, and then, but there were other people involved with the whole crime in that they were fences or something like that, like the guy that's in Palenque, who's their friend, who takes them to introduce them to the British guy. I thought one of the amazing things in the film was it's such a great scene with the British guy, and the audience suddenly realizes, well, of course it's impossible to sell these things. So the two guys didn't have any idea of that. They thought that they could sell the things. I mean, that's sort of like, or were they that clueless, or would a lot of criminals be that clueless?
Well, again, we don't really know. We know that it was through them trying to fence the pieces that they eventually got caught.
Yeah.
Almost 4 years. In the real story is that almost 4 years after the heist, they got caught. So the pieces spent a lot of time inside the closet of one of them. Yeah, that's how it was. Yeah, that was it. Yeah.
Gael, did you get attached, like maybe one of these criminals did, to the jade mask or any of the other relics that you had? Did you play with them and take them home?
Well, there was some amazing replicas done. Well, everything that we worked with was replica, and they were incredibly well made. I mean, it was a team of the production department combined with real restauradores, ¿cómo se dice? Restorers,
Preservationists?
conservators, conservatives,
Republicans?
conservationists.
Conservationists?
You know
the people
what,
who
you know.
work restoring the pieces.
Exactly. Yeah.
Whatever they're
So they made a really good job of making these pieces look incredible, you know. And actually, some of them were made of jade also, and gold, and, you know, like, I mean, well, gold only the outside, no, like, and they looked incredible. Up to, I mean, they even cataloged them so that you know, they cannot be confused and sold or whatever, you know. And I only stayed with one little, you know, the little coyote that like a little belt. Yeah, that one I have. Yeah, and I stole it.
from
No,
the set.
I
You fucking stole it.
yeah.
man.
If I stole it, I would say this. Yeah, right. Yeah, come on. Like, no, so yeah, it is no. There were so many great pieces there, you know, and the thing is that it's incredible how you charge them with something. For me, they mean the film. You know, they are not nothing to do with with you know, if there's some Mexica art pieces, you know, I see them and I remember Alonso and I remember us doing the film and that moment of my life, you know, and so yeah, it's just a little thing. I'm not a collector of anything, but the only little, like one thing from each film, I go like, yeah, this is reminds me of the film.
I want to ask the audience a question. How many of you have been to this museum, the Museum of Archaeology in Mexico City? A lot of people here in the last audience we did. It's just the most amazing museum, I think. And so I think that the quality of that museum, you know, I was thinking, Alonso, just the other day when that museum in Brazil burned down, that was so terrible, a just 200-year-old museum, how much of people's national identities are tied up in these symbols and such. And I think that with Mexico, we get a real sense of that in sort of the reaction to the theft, but also you start as an American to think of the difference between what became the United States and what became Mexico. Mexico has this amazing civilization with enormous pyramids and cities and all that sort of thing that is underneath the identity that they've had since the Spanish invasion. And it seems to me this resonates throughout the film. You were talking about that earlier in the relation of history to fictions and stories. Tell me more about what you thought about that in terms of this story, because we not only have the museum, we also go to Palenque, which is another side of this amazing pre-Columbian or pre-Hispanic culture.
Well, I guess making the film itself was a process of rediscovering all of these themes that are fascinating and that I had never spent time with. You know, I think I like the films to speak the themes to me and to like. I think my job is to uncover them and follow them until you hit a wall, I guess, and then follow the next one. But yeah, this story seemed to contain all these themes about, like you say, national identity and the preservation and looting. I read this wonderful book called Loot, and it's the story of the 6 museums in the world and how they were made and how those collections were assembled. And it's basically through plundering and looting how that the British Museum, the Met, and the Louvre got all their stuff, and there's all these debates about restitution and whether that's the right path. And the book is very smart in like saying, well, there's no straight answer. There isn't one answer to that, because I tried to expose a little bit of that in the Frank Graves scene.
Yeah.
And it's a difficult thing. And in Mexico, you can see those discussions as well. For example, with the Tlaloc stone, that when that happened in 1964, there were protests and from the town where they took it from, and there's no footage of that. There's absolutely no footage or pictures of the protests. And there's a good documentary about it, about the people protesting. But yeah, so again, it was doing this film was a case of like delving into those themes that were fascinating and seeing especially what they have to tell us now. You know, I think the luckiest part about making this film was all the time we got to spend at the museum, thinking about it, wondering about it, also about not only the story that it holds, but also the story of the building of the museum itself is very interesting. In 1960.
Yeah, I was going to ask Gael.
I don't think I answered.
No, I thought you did fine, but I was going to ask Gael something sort of related to that. The story takes place in 3 very distinct locations that I think each has a kind of a meaning, a deep meaning in some ways to Mexicans. And the museum, it's the first time they've ever allowed a film to shoot there. What was that like for you? What was Palenque like, and what was Acapulco like? I was just going to clarify by saying that the museum stuff, you built a set for all of the sort of the robbery, but you shot inside the museum.
Inside whenever it was inside the halls, like that was remade in in Estudios Churubusco, and it was part of this team, no, the production design team that made this. I mean, they made it also like it was in 1985, you know. So because it changed a lot, the museum. Yeah, I mean, there's a presidential decree of not being able, like, not allowing filming in these places, you know, in archaeological places, or it is and there's a reason for it, of course, because I mean, a film kind of tramples anywhere it steps, you know. There is a saying that wherever a film passes, the grass doesn't grow afterwards, you know. Which is kind of, it's crazy, but it's kind of, I mean, a film crew, a film set, I don't know, it's very violent the way it imposes itself on places, but obviously with those limitations, there was something that needed to be kind of done, and that was the work also of the producers and Alonso, convincing, you know, the people that take those decisions to, you know, express to them what this was, you know, and they kind of, yeah, they bended the hand and they allowed us to do it with limitations, but those limitations were really, I don't know, also they gave us a lot of freedom as well to try out, or they sparked the creativity, you know, on how to shoot it and how to go around with that, and it was incredible. I mean, it's amazing. And then, yeah, we shot in Acapulco, we shot in Palenque. Acapulco is also a wonderful place that it's kind of set in that time. I mean, I've been saying this, but I have to repeat it because I had never been to Acapulco. It was my first time. Yeah, yeah. It's got an explanation. Yeah. It's it's wonderful, that place, you know. It's beautiful. It's really, really nice, and it was great to shoot there, and also in Palenque, man. I mean, Palenque is beyond. You know, we had a chance to be there in the night, listening to the Saraguatos screaming and looking at the stars, no, and had this amazing moment. I mean, it's just it was incredible to be there. And to have the privilege of being there on our own, you know, and capturing everything, you know, it was really beautiful.
And before I open the questions to audience, I want to just ask again, King Pakal in a spaceship or not down there in the
Oh yeah, there is that mythology, no, and there's, I'm sure there in YouTube there's like thousands of videos of
shit, like
yeah,
people like really
yeah,
doing the whole NASA astronaut shit, and
yeah, it is. I mean, it's interesting. Go check it out. Yeah, because there's like some people argue a lot strongly that he left on a spaceship. Yeah.
Alonso, Gael, muchísimas felicidades. Gracias por venir. So I think you've probably been asked this, but I wanted to personally ask. At the end, when he's leaving the bags at the lockers and the number on the little plaque is the 43, the narration says something that people don't realize what they have until it's gone. Was this a reference to Ayotzinapa? And if you wanted to talk a little bit about it.
Yes, yeah, it absolutely was a reference to the 43 disappeared students from Ayotzinapa. It was, I guess, just a little clue that, you know, films are filled with personal clues and national clues, and it was a nice way to remember, you know, for us living there. For me, it was one of the most shocking, traumatic events of recent years, even though this kind of stuff happens sadly happens all the time. The way this happened and the fact that, like you said, it hasn't been solved. It's also a crime that hasn't been completely solved. I don't know. It was very traumatic. So I guess it was just our way of honoring the memory of these people. And
I also thought of that same crime when I wrote about Güeros, which is about the student culture of Mexico, and that film takes place in 1999 when there's student strikes, but it makes you think back to 1968 and what went on then with the students being killed, and that makes you think of these 43, and it's like, it's sort of these things are all kind of tied together, and you have spoken about this, I think, publicly a fair amount, the 43.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is, yeah, it's part of who we are. And actually, the strike, the student strike in 1998, 99, it's part of who we are, because you never studied, no, at UNAM, no, no.
I was going to start when the
Yeah. Okay. I started studying then the strike started then, yeah. So it's part of, we ended up here, you know.
Congratulations on a provocative and beautifully shot film. This is just a lighter question, more about process. I really enjoyed the fight scene and the way that you edited and a lot of the sections that kind of divert from a more straight kind of shooting and editing. And I just want to know if you could talk about, in one portion, Gael seemed to actually be practicing breaking the bottle in the back of the neck. And I just love that, those kinds of edits. And if you could just talk about your inspiration for that or your process, etc.
generally, I try to play a little bit with the form. You know, I've been, I guess, criticized for like taking those kinds of freedoms in films, and you know, some people like, oh, that's bullshit. And I'm like, I hate people who treat film like a biology homework or something like that. You know, that take it too seriously, and then it's like it has to hurt and be, you know, I'm not like that. I don't respond to that. So I like to play with the form in cinema, and I think that's something that me and Damian, my DP, who I've shot many things with, we like to do on the set, and discover the scenes and let them tell us where they want to go. And that particular scene, it was half designed and half what came up on the spot, and also what came up on the editing room. I think that, you know, film is never only one thing. I think it's a combination of the pre-planning process and also discovering it on the set. But the idea for that was that the film, Juan's character was lost by that point in the film. He didn't have you know, like we'd lost the plot of the film, and when we were writing it, we felt like that ourselves too. We were like, well, the film is like kind of going like, and so we kind of embraced that, and we thought, well, let's let the whole film kind of go into this weird B movie, I guess, and then we realized that we were actually getting inside Juan's head, actually, like confused and you know, and lost as he felt, and also it had something to do with Sherezada and the kind of films that she does, and honoring that in a way. So and then how it ended up, I think, was the cutting room. I didn't plan to use those little moments that I used, but then when we started cutting it, it was just funny to us, like to see Gael practicing, and you never know what's gonna end up.
Thank you. What makes the story fascinating is that, you know, the pieces were returned because these kids didn't have a plan. And what I loved about it was that you showed a Mexico that we don't see in the media, and I loved it. So I just wanted to know if that was intentional, or why did you do that particular scene? And it was beautiful.
Thank you. Well, I think it was important to, when I was writing, I really wanted to see, I had a lot of advice from particularly one guy who's a friend of mine, who's an anthropologist and an ethnologist, and I spoke to him a lot about the site of Palenque and about the site of Palenque today, and he said, well, one of the really interesting things as an anthropologist is what happens to the Mayas who live there today, because you know, they're the straight descendants from that culture, and yet they're kept sort of on the fringes of that. Sometimes they're allowed to work in the site, but under very strict conditions, and that. So I wanted to show that just you know not make a big thing out of it, because that's not what the film is about, but just to have these two guys who somehow could have been Juan and Wilson, another Juan and Wilson, just hanging out, smoking and talking about girls, and which is what they were actually talking about. Like they were improvising, and they said, well, what do you want us to talk about? And I said, well, talk about, because one of them was a real ladies' man, you know, with the European women, and so he was telling us all these stories, and I said, well, go for that, and then they really.
And they would talk also really bad about us as well.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah. They were like, oh, what is these assholes coming here? You know, what do they want? You know, like it's like.
But Gael, this is where you should talk about your Carlos Castaneda exercises, right?
There is a okay. There is in a beautiful, amazing, really incredible river. I can't remember the name. What was the name?
El Usumacinta, ¿no?
No, but the one that we were
¿En la
shooting.
cascada?
Sí. ¿Cuál era? ¿Cómo se llamaba? Okay, it's a beautiful place near Palenque, and you know it's full. There's many. I mean, there's many rivers. There's many, and this has a little this fall, no, and this beautiful kind of like pools of water, no, and we're there swimming, and a couple of days before, just wondering about Castaneda, reading about him, you know, and actually in YouTube, looking at, you know, images of, let's see if Castaneda exists or not, you know, like just wandering around there. So these exercises that are the Chacmol exercises, you know, to become Chacmol, and it's I can't remember because the name of the exercises, because it's something like tergiversación, but it's not that. Of course, it's something different, and they are very strange exercises that like warm up exercises, and also, you know, if you do them every day against the moon, you know, you build strength. That is, and the exercises are like that was the crab, the one that Juan is doing up in the rock. Yeah, exactly. And there's many exercises that are done, and there's some of them. One of them is like this, you know, and I mean, just check it out, because it is quite fascinating that there's this other type of exercises, you know, and it was great because we thought that it kind of, you know, it made sense that Juan and Wilson would know about this, no? Yeah.
Did you meet anybody there that did these exercises? Have they been passed down, or are they things that Castaneda just sort of introduced?
No, Castaneda maybe went there, but Castaneda has nothing to do with Palenque.
Oh, okay. But he didn't. You didn't meet people there that were doing these exercises in Palenque.
No.
Okay. Another question back here.
Alonso, lo estaba diciendo mejor en español. When you were rewriting the script, were you like, oh, I want Gael to be the actor in this film? And then for Gael, I love you. So before you leave, can I get a hug, please? Pero the second part question is, this really reminded me, the beach scene just like reminded me when you were in Mi Mamá y Tú También. And I was just like, oh, flashback, pero te ves joven todavía. What inspires you to choose the roles that you choose? So two-part. Y el abrazo también.
I also wanted a hug, so it was way too.
I mean, it's. I think. I mean, I've been talking a lot about this recently. You know, about wondering and pondering why the hell we do what we do. You know, and really doing films. It is a wonderful way to do an act of faith, a fraternal act of faith. You know, just it is interesting to. It gives us so much, you know, to be amongst friends and to enjoy each other's company and really go for an introspection or a reflection on something that eventually we know that nothing matters. If nobody did this, it wouldn't matter, you know, because really if a film exists or not, really empirically it doesn't matter. The world still turns, you know, it kind of. but when we're there, right there in the moment, there is something that becomes the most important thing, and we want to really accomplish it, and we want to really get somewhere, and hopefully the film transcends in some way. So that nos hermana, no? Bonds us. The bonds are really strong that are formed. We might not see each other for years and years, and then when we see each other, it's like old cousins, you know, that we shared something really interesting and really profound, and we trust each other, we love each other, you know. So it's that kind of thing that makes me, on one side, want to make films. Really, I mean, it's that experience. I mean, and then there's the other, the film in itself, and those are the decisions. That's how I decide, you know. It's if it's gonna be an experience that I'm gonna, you know, feel this, you know, then I'm halfway through wanting to do it. But there's no real formula, because every film is its own thing, you know. And in this case with MUSEO, I mean, it was Alonso, who I know, we're from the same generation in school. I mean, we didn't go to the same school, but kind of like similar schools, no? And so I know of, we know of each other's existence since we were kids, and it was great to be able to, whoa, like now it's serious, you know. now we're gonna do something that is very, very serious, and I also enjoying a lot Alonso's work, you know, in theater a lot. I mean, he's done amazing plays and really, really strong. I don't know, like Güeros is a wonderful film. So it was a delight when he talked to me about the film.
And do you want to answer about, were you thinking of him when you were writing the film?
Yeah, I mean, no. No, eventually I was like, I think it always happens to me when I'm writing something that when I put a face to the name, even if it's not an actor, sometimes it's a person I know, but as soon as I can picture that face, I can say, oh, it takes shape. The writing becomes easier. That's for sure. And that happened in this case. When we were writing, we had the first drafts, and I was like, oh, who's that guy? Who's that guy? And then I thought of him. Also, because I needed somebody who was short like me. No, it was an important part of the character, you know, this kind of Napoleon syndrome. Yeah, it's true. And yeah. I don't know. I was gonna say something. We're really hungover. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
That's okay. You may still get a hug. Anyway, thanks to Gael. Thanks to Alonso for coming.
Thank you. Thank you.
Congratulations
Thank you.
on this great film.